Estamos hablando de estrategia y de táctica.
We are talking about strategy and tactics, and we are using military examples. Don't be surprised, because Lenin thought, and I believe not Lenin, that political struggle or revolutionary struggle is a war, a class war. As you know, Marxism considered that the history of humanity is the history of the struggle between the ruling class, who are exploiters, and the dominant classes, who are exploited and tend to rebel. It is for that reason that these concepts of military strategy and tactique can apply perfectly to political struggle. Now, it's important to consider that not always can we, the revolutionary forces who confront the enemy, be in the offensive. At times we have to go on the defensive, and that is something which often the most radical of the left do not understand. They believe that to be revolutionary, one must always be an offensive, and what anybody who goes on the defensive or anybody who retreats is a reformist, someone who has betrayed the revolution. There are times when the offensive passes into the hands of the enemy. All those times when the enemy has won or has gained the offensive, we have to be able to going back to reorganize our forces, to enable them to survive in order to launch an offensive in the future. Because if we do not go back, what can happen is that they all could die in the battle. And if they all die in the battle, as heroic as that may be, there will be no possibility of building the future, as is planned politically. As well as it is opportunism not to take advantage of the conditions to advance when they are favorable to the revolutionary process, it is adventurism to proceed when conditions do not exist for the struggle to be successful. The art of revolutionary political leadership is to promote struggle, which is so broad that all the sectors of the opposition to the conservative forces can join together and lend mutual support in the struggle to vanquish that enemy. A good political strategist, then, is that who promotes the broad articulation of sectors.
Lenin planteaba que para lograr esto era
Lenin
fundamental
considered it was fundamental in order to succeed to attain what he called a positive program of action. We can say a platform for struggle which unites those broad sectors of the population. Therefore, this platform for struggle, or this positive program of action, has to contain issues which bring all those people together. If our program of action, if our platform for struggle, is a very radical platform, many sectors will scared and they will marginalize themselves from the struggle, and instead of adding, we will subtracting. That is important, because at times we believe we are revolutionary by being the most radical in our positions. But that produces the opposite effect, because it does not allow us to gain forces, those that in the future will make possible what today seems impossible. Already we said that it's important we determine who are the opposing forces, how are they organized, what are the ways in which they are associated, and how they are proceeding. What Lenin pointed out was that the revolutionary strategy ought to indicate those who can be counted on and those who must be fought, and in what precise conditions. That is important. One needs to have a general strategy and tactic at each conjuncture. And I say that this has to be done at each new situation, because the conjuncture is constantly changing. The situation after the Constituent Assembly was very different from the situation before the coup d'etat in April 2002 in Venezuela. Then, after making a diagnosis of the specific situation, tactics must be worked out. They are the ways in which a strategy is accomplished. Tactics must include a reference to the structures of organization, that is to say, how we organize ourselves. We must keep in mind that if we have a war against an armed invader, our approach to such a challenge is very different than if we are fighting an enemy in the electoral realm or in the media. Then we have to distinguish among the organizational structure we must adopt and the method of fighting we are going to use. For example, we will use insurrectional or electoral means. The specific form used to take advantage of the contradiction within the enemy is very important, because it is not only a question of evaluating the strength of the enemy forces, but of estimating both the strength and the weaknesses. And among the weaknesses are the contradictions which arise internally within the enemy forces. We can win a battle not because we are very strong, but because the enemy has many internal contradictions and these weaknesses.
Y por último está el tema de las formas de agitación.
And ultimately, there is the issue of what kind of agitation and propaganda should be done, because people are moved by various motivations, and the political instrument should be able to address those motivations so that people are energized, move and fight. And into this comes the important role of what we call the political slogan, which are precisely those strong ideas needed to motivate people to fight for certain goals. Political slogans are short phrases that function as powerful ideas which synthesize the meaning and the specific orientation of an action. Here I will give you a very clear example. When the Russian Revolution took place in February, there were two forces that overthrew Tsarism. On one hand, there were the people organized in the workers and soldier Soviets, and on the other hand, the bourgeois forces that took over the state apparatus. When Lenin was outside the country, because he was exiled, he thought that the basic slogan should be "down with the provisional bourgeois government." But when he arrived in Russia, he realized that people believe in that government because, unlike the Tsar, it has opened democratic spaces and people feel free to meeting and felt liberated from Tsarist oppression. And they were convinced that there would be peace. The people had illusions, but Lenin and the Bolshevik knew that this new government was not going to maintain the peace, that he was interested in the war, because of the class composition and because of its relation with imperialists. And therefore, what did Lenin say? We cannot write a slogan, overthrow the provisional government, the people will not understand, the people believe in this government. What must we do? The task at that time assigned to the party was to educate, to explain the people that the government in which they believe was going to go to the war. And a little later, it declared the war. And at that time, the popular sectors and workers realized that the Bolsheviks were right, and then they began to change their mind and wanted now to defeat the bourgeois government because they did not want at all to continue fighting. And then, for sure, the slogan "down with the provisional government" had to be raised. That is important because a slogan can seem to be correct, but if it does not correspond to the view and the emotional state of the people at that time, it can be mistaken.